seems reasonable enough to me. How y'all doing? I'm Big Al, and welcome back to the garage. If you're new to the channel, please take a moment to like and subscribe. And also, I throw a link to this in the description. Send me your project car pictures at bigalsgarage@gmail.com because I want to see what you're working on, and I'd love to feature it here on the channel. And now to the meat of what we are going to be talking about tonight, Leno's Law. This is kind of a big deal for collector car owners, especially those who live in California. It's been in the news recently, and the gist of it is it would give owners of cars 35 years old and older an exemption to California's draconian emissions laws. California, all cars 1975 and newer are currently subject to the state's onerous smog check laws. Now, those of you who have watched this channel for a while know that I am no fan of emissions testing or safety inspections for that matter. I think they're kind of a pain in the neck. I think it's government overreach. And when I lived in New York, I lived on Long Island, and at the time it was just Long Island, New York City, Rockland, and Westchester counties that had to have it done. Rather than make the hundreds of dollars in repairs that my 93 Camry would have used, falsified my registration and registered the car in Ulster County to get around it. So, call me a libertarian, call me a rebel, call me a polluter, call me what you like. I am grateful now that I live here in the free state of South Carolina and no longer have to put up with that nonsense. But Californians, yeah, I mean, cars from 1975 and newer, that's ridiculous. The law, of course, would only pertain to cars that are registered and insured as classic cars. Seems reasonable enough to me. But now we have this article on crack.com. I'll throw a link in the description. It's an absolute hatchet job on this law, not even attempting to be objective journalism. Matt Solomon wrote the article. California State Transportation Committee passed a bill with bipartisan support this week, the first step making life easier for classic car owners, reports the Late Nighter. The proposed rule is known as Leno's Law, for Jay Leno. Yes, that Jay Leno, the comedian and car guy. The proposed, I read that already, is the main person who will benefit is comedian Jay Leno. In fact, Leno helped author the bill during a time when California is struggling with its homeless population, destructive wildfires, and some of the highest taxes in the nation. Yep, so glad I don't live there. Its lawmakers are working to help classic car owners skirt around anti-smog laws. California Air Resources Board, boo! Where did I leave off? Currently requires all vehicles built 1975 or later to undergo a smog check every 2 years. But Leno's Law would eliminate the smog checks for vehicles 35 years old or older if they are insured as classic cars. Again, very reasonable, except if you're an idiot like the person who wrote this article. Let's see, how many Californians own a variety of expensive classic cars and the means to insure them as such? Leno is one, Jerry Seinfeld is another. The main requirement to be in this exclusive club, prodigious riches that allow one to afford a classic car collection. This is just utter male bovine excrement. Not everyone who owns a classic car is a billionaire. A lot of classic car owners are just ordinary Joe Sixpacks. I'm no billionaire and I own a classic car, albeit a less expensive one. Most guys who own classic cars found them as rusted out wrecks, lovingly restored them over a period of years. So no, not every classic car owner is a billionaire. Go to any car show. Most of us are just working stiffs. trying to keep our cars running and enjoying it as a hobby. And as for the part of having the means to insure classic cars as such, well, clearly, Matt Solomon, you didn't do your research, because if you had, you'd realize that insuring a classic car is actually cheaper than insuring a regular vehicle. Because guess what? Insurance companies know the score. They know that these cars aren't driven daily. That's why they're cheap to insure. My Corvair costs $127 for a year to insure, whereas my Camry close to $1,400 a year because it's driven a ton more. And the classic car insurance has the caveats. I can only drive the car for, going to and from car shows, parades, and special events, and occasional pleasure driving. They never define how occasional, but I told my insurance company that I would not drive the car more than $5,000 a year, and that's probably a gross overestimate. I probably at most put maybe 2,000 miles a year on the Corvair. And that's why they're cheap to insure. I mean, you don't have to be rich. There are plenty of affordable classics out there. Plenty of cars from the 80s, the 90s, that are good, affordable classic cars, whose only crime was being made after some arbitrary, well, actually, no, 1975 is not totally arbitrary. It's the year that catalytic converters were mandated. But the other thing is, cars that are 35 years old and older, like I've mentioned, they're not driven daily. They are fewer, they're about 1% of the total vehicles on the road, so the impact they have on the environment is negligible, and they would have the restriction of being only driven to and from car shows and occasional pleasure driving. So the damage to the environment would be very minimal. Requiring these cars to go through smog check would be kind of like outlawing steam locomotives. Yes, steam locomotives burn coal and are horrible to the environment, but guess what? They're not in common usage anymore. They're just used on heritage railroads and museums. They're not in everyday use. So the environmental damage they cause is very, very negligible. It's literally a drop in the ocean. So they are clearly very misguided at crack.com. Hope some of you will write a letter to the editor. And Jay Leno makes some great points. Just because he's rich doesn't mean he's wrong. I think a lot of people in this country need to get that through their heads. Makes the point that California was the center of hot rodding culture and car culture, and that should be preserved. That's what this law will do. A lot of people buy classic cars out of California because of these stupid laws. These stupid laws are why people create Montana LLCs to register their cars in Montana. Doug Tabbitt, on his Switch Cars podcast, which I strongly suggest you check out, did a whole piece on this too, and also made the same argument that it's like less than 1% of the cars on the road. And the impact is very negligible. And yes, and that main point he made is that if laws were reasonable, people wouldn't go out of their way and find ways to circumvent them. Which is what I did back when I lived in New York, which is almost as bad as California, and on top of being almost as bad as California, the weather sucks most of the year. So that's it. I think the arguments against this law, about it only benefiting billionaires, are, pardon my French, bullshit. There goes my G rating. And the idea that, and they also, further on in the article, let me see if I can find it, towards the end, they have a guy from the American Lung Association in here. Where is it? American Lung Association Senior Director Will Barrett isn't a fan. It's a real jailbreak for air quality problems in California. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. Like I said, cars that are 35 years old and older are less than 1% of the cars on the road, and they're not daily driven. The impact is so negligible that you won't even notice a difference in the air quality. And I am all for, not polluting. I am somewhat pro-environment, but this is ridiculous. And I think Leno's law is a very good thing. I really do hope it passes. I don't think it has a snowball's chance in hell, but we shall see. Fingers crossed, everybody. And if you are a viewer who lives in California and you support this, I suggest you write to your legislator and tell them that you support this law. Anyway, that is it for tonight. I hope you will please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. And I will catch you on the next installment